dich reserviert. Hallo. Noch was sagen?
AVZ.
Das ist ja, da muss man dann geht man so durch die Halle am Audimarkt vorbei, einmal durch und dann links, dann ist es ganz am Ende des genau. Wer sind denn noch deine... Ja, eigentlich... Brauchen wir nur ein Mikro.
Hello. Good evening.
Einmal tauschen.
Was?
Einmal tauschen. Das ist besser.
Okay. I think the bar already opened, but we'd like to start. The live streaming is already online. So maybe you get quickly your beer or your water, and then we can start. So, hi guys, hi. I think I'll wait just 1 minute. And then we can... Okay, maybe we'll be all right if just those still get a beer and some water. I'd like to thank you for coming. It's an absolute honor to see you all. I hope those upstairs are going to be able to be comfortable. A bit louder, yeah, this is a good question. Can you hear me like this? Yes, okay. Otherwise we'll have to turn the sound up, which is controlled in there. So, welcome to you all here. We're online in the IFA YouTube channel. So, I think now we're even louder, so I'm going to step back a little bit here. Before I start, I want to say a few words of thanks. And the first one, of course, for the TU Berlin, for my 11 years here. It's been a great time. And it's been wonderful to be here. I'd like to also thank IFA, the Institute for Architecture, and of course my colleagues, some of whom are here, and specifically the Dean of the Faculty, I should really say, right? That's what you are, Kristen Wellner. And the GD, Eike Roswa-Kling, who's not here, couldn't come, and there are some other colleagues who I would like to extend a great welcome. Maybe specifically, I'd like to thank, of course, Jörg. Jörg, you're kind of responsible. Kind of, somehow, ETH, right? Somehow, you know, so he triggered this, that I was here. And then I'd like to especially thank two colleagues. Ignacia Borrega, I want to thank you for helping to start the next big project, I would say. This has been a great relief that is possible. And Herman Schlimet, I would like to thank for taking over the dual degree with Tsinghua University, the #1 the architecture degree that we have in Germany, to create an exchange of students between the TU, architecture students, the TU and the Tsinghua University. Then I'd like to thank in general all the contributors to the series of projects I will show. It's impossible to kind of list them all. And, I would specifically then thank the students that I've had the honor to be with, to teach, to learn from, to exchange with, and maybe my greatest thank you goes to all of them, and I see many familiar faces here. Now, on a more practical level, it's been a great kind of thing to organize this, and I'd like to thank those that helped organize this lecture, my exit lecture, which is a literal translation of Austritz Vorlesung. And I'd like to thank the team that helped me here set this up, run the lecture, test the lecture, and so forth. So there's Moritz, Fong, Sabe, Sarah, Bo, Alex, Hamed, Arthur, Peter, and Asia. And yes, let's go one step further, because I have some more people to thank. And the lecture is called Second Skin, What's Next? Partly because there is this kind of large question of what is really going to happen with our habitat on Earth. And so I named two names here: climate change, conscious city, and then of course the past and the future. But also it's my own what's next. What am I going to do next? And I will very much focus on that. Kind of, I will introduce you to a kind of next step, and then use that step to frame, as it were, some themes that circle around these two issues. And so I want to thank all the people that have been part of the chair, specifically maybe the latest ones, Georg and Johannes and Laura, of course Moritz again, and then of course Vasita and Sebastian, Gautze. These are the most recent ones, but over the last 11 years, these are some of the people that have been with us in various positions of teaching, research, and so on, and some are still with us, because as you know, the Conscious City Lab continues on the 3rd floor, and I'm really quite grateful for that. So my thanks also to all of these people. So let's move into the next stage, and the next stage is a question of what are these two issues: the climate change and conscious city. And as those that have been in our studios and in my lectures, they know that I can talk a lot about this. So I had some things, and then Moritz said, don't show this because everybody knows what is climate change, and I hope so, at least those in the room here. I have my doubts that everybody out there knows what climate change is, but we'll find out. And probably a little bit less clear is what conscious city is, and I'll talk a bit about that, maybe more specifically. Some of you know these diagrams. This is the kind of the topology that I like to kind of work with, because we always deal with kind of total images, the totality of planetary dynamics, whether they are the climate crisis we're living in, or whether they are the big data-driven changes that we are undergoing right now. So we did a quick search about what is actually conscious city, or what do you get when you go into Google. And it was actually quite funny, because there is quite a lot going on. There's several congresses, there's some cities beginning to call themselves conscious city, and of course it was great fun to see ourselves popping up in a series of moments. Of course, Cora conscious city is clear, but then at some point Imo, who sits here somewhere, popped up. He's, I think, in the next page somewhere. Here we have images of the former lab, the former Conscious City Lab on the 2nd floor. And so we realized, and here, well, I guess, then we have one of the exhibition images that we've had, and here with the cybernetics, of course, and then the spheres, and so on. So we realized we're part of a movement, and we're part of a wave even, and that kind of pleased me. It doesn't explain anything, but it was actually great to see that. So the question is now how to develop that theme further. And one way to do that is a project that is right now starting, and which will frame the rest of the lecture. In fact, it's a publication broadcasting program that I'm developing together with Cora, still with the TU Berlin, and with two main partners, Joost Schotens, Studio Joost Schotens, kind of wonderful designer that I've worked with since we're both young, and Japsam Books, fantastic publisher in the Netherlands, and of course the Architectural Association we are working with, and my wife, Hélène Binet, who sits right here, and who I should really thank for being with me all this time, many years, in fact, already. So, and then, of course, worked by many students in various universities over the years. So this is the official title of this publication program, and we have already started with it. And I just read, this is the only text you're going to get, almost. I just read it out for those that cannot see it. Has humanity formed a second skin that wraps the first skin of the earth, lifting off from its earthly bounds, and yet transforming it in the process? Is this the most radical leap forward yet? a unified global home for all future generations, a vision of a perfect utopia, or an intelligent but unpredictable planetary and possibly nature-based variable that will gradually subsume its maker. That's been the research question in a whole series of grant applications and so on and so forth. And then what follows that are these three themes. The second skin is a human-made construct, and it poses new challenges to human society as one, the choreography of urban systems as a second skin, the second skin of the earth, I should say, but the second skin is then the title of the chapter. Two, the climate crisis and the curation of a new nature. Three, conscious cities and cybernetic metaspaces. Now I'll take you through these three themes one by one. First, a glimpse of what is to come in this publication project. We haven't published so much with Cora, but there's two key kind of publications that stand out and are absolutely unavailable. And one is the Urban Flotsam, done in 2001, and the other one is Metaspaces, the first book we have done with Joost Schotens. What we've decided is to create 4 sets of books. Each set will contain one of the large ones and 6 of the smaller ones. And here you see a little bit of a sample of what is coming. The Taiwan Strait Conscious City Incubator, already 20 years in the making, will be published in January. I will show a bit of that now in this lecture. And here you see some samples of the books that go both back in the past and go forward. For example, a book about the Spreebogen Berlin. I'll show that for metaspaces, climate crisis and planetary mapping, and apparent Berlin. Some of these I'll show. So I'm going to take you now through some of the projects that we are planning. That's why I will say 2 more things about it. It's a project that will roughly run 2 years. And maybe the most interesting bit here is the book publications, and we're talking about 20 to 30 books. Is scheduled like this. So the Taiwan Strait book comes out early next year, and then the smaller books will come in groups of 2, 3, and 4. And then there will be a digital platform where some of the things like the metaspace that you will see in a minute will be published. And then there will be a series of online events. Then the collaboration with the Architectural Association consists of 3 global workshops. They are the kind of global forum workshops that will be based on these 3 themes. And today they were opened. The open day of the AA was today, and all 3 themes were opened today. The first one will be held in Berlin next year. They're all next year, one after the other. The next one in Surabaya in Indonesia, and the third one in Sao Paulo in Brazil. And so this is kind of the overall structure that will then, just to give you a hint of some of the books coming here. This is a small selection, and I'm not going to read all of them, don't worry, but you see here we have the large format, which is the Taiwan Strait Incubator. The next large format is a series of 4 projects which mainly contain photographs of Hélène here. And then in between there will be projects about a Tempelhof. We're just having talks at the moment with Tempelhof Project about next year's 100 years of Tempelhof exhibition. We will be part of that. But there will be also things like urban curation, which will show the kind of history of the work of Cora and Cora at the TU about urban curation. Again, some glimpses I will show of that. Then there will be, for example, books like Global Bamboo Belt, which I will show you something about, which is our forthcoming project on global bamboo and kind of prototyping bamboo as a construction material. The Breathing Arctic, which is a project done by a team of students. and from Smart City to Conscious City, which will contain a series of articles. So I'm going to jump straight in and just take you through some of these. In terms of chronology, I'm going to weave you through time. Sometimes I'm right here, sometimes I'm kind of looking in the future, sometimes I'm going way back where I started. And let's start. Of course, again, the times that we had together, we now students, before COVID, were, I would say, were great for me because I could sketch on blackboards, green boards actually. So some of the greatest fun I've had here is always to sketch at the beginning of a lecture before we just got into. And one of the things I've been teaching bachelor students over the years is a mini history of architecture. I'm not showing that lecture. This will be part of the books. But it is structured like this. Cave, kind of ur-architectuur, core architecture, ground, the kind of the solidity of architecture, the horizons when you look out and urbanism begins to start, and wind is when it starts to be planetary, but also perhaps spiritual. And this has kind of been a motto. All of these zusammen, all of these together, you see I'm mixing my languages, having been too long here. All of these together make up the first rough version of this second skin of the earth. And let's go way back for a moment. And here I am, this is my hand actually, here I am pushing black cement into a mold to create a prefabricated ferro cement piece for a project we did for the official Hall of Architecture in Moscow. And there's two themes here. One is the themes of matter, pressing matter in a mold, kind of creating the building components for an architecture. And the other one is something that's slightly different. It's mixing different materials, and here the theme is stitching. So this is a piece of leather stitched together, and you'll see this theme coming back into some of the other projects. The stitching holds things together. It's an architectural detail, but it's also a symbolic form. In this case, a symbolic form of negotiation across a cut. And here are some of the images. These are some of the photographs of Hélène I was talking about, of this project, The Skin of the Earth. And the Skin of the Earth was a project about a kind of domestic environment that was in the process of falling apart. And the domestic environment was a metaphorical representation of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union existed in 1988, and the Soviet Union consisted out of 15 parts. And in 1988, there was a kind of development towards its dissolution. Recently, Gorbachev died, and there was a lot of text in the press about the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And this project was about that. Of course, it's also a material project about ferro cement, testing materialities and so forth. But the great fun was, in a way, to talk this metaphorical language about something political that was happening, using a metaphorical architectural language to depict this what was happening. And the question is this possible? It was possible. It was in the official Hall of Architecture. And it was an amazing experiment to do that. And I show you a picture of this. The people, we took a break, right? I mean, this is what it looked like. We took a break. And it's of course great to see us back here. Here I'm munching on my sandwich. And then you see a bunch of people that came with me. And Hélène, who was here also, I think you're just out of the image. You're photographing. Ah, of course. She's photographing, so she's here. It's people that became longtime members of Cora, like Takuro Hoshino at the moment, Juan Danelas, and yes, and then there are the key people of the paper architects. The paper architects was a famous group of architects that developed this symbolic, abstract language that was partly critical of the political system, but they couldn't show that directly. So you have Sasha Brodsky here, you have Ilya Utkin here, for example. You probably know them from the history of architecture. Now, all of these, the people, I would say, the kind of Russians, they come, of course, from different parts of the Soviet Union. and they represented this. And it was quite interesting to work with them on this project in this official Hall of Architecture, and create a project that was powerful. I'm saying it is powerful in the sense now that I'm looking back on it. We are in the middle of a war, and this war is rooted in this time, in the project of the Soviet Union. So there's certainly no relevance in publishing some of this work. 1 year back, we came to Berlin here, and we built a project for an exhibition that was called Berlin Denkmal oder Denkmodell. A beautiful title invented by Christine Feiras, and she created this whole exhibition. And for this project, we did something similar to the Skin of the Earth, but a year earlier. Skin of the Earth, by the way, was actually installed in 2000, 1 year before the actual dissolution. This project was set up in the exhibition in '88, and it was a project about the kind of bringing together the cultural centers of East and West Berlin to kind of negotiate how could two totally different cultural centers, different ideologies work together in a kind of urban symbolic form. At the time, nobody was even imagining that the wall could fall. Right? It was impossible, and it did fall a year later. So this project is about, it's an architectural urban project that weaves together these different centers. Of course, the wall was here. The wall was, of course, a product of the Second World War and part of the kind of field of influence of the Soviet Union. You had the wall here, and this project somehow kind of ignored that almost and started to look, can we create a new form of architecture, what I call the burnt earth in Berlin, in which you begin to create a kind of cohesion, a weaving together across the ideological divides. And the work is very haptic. These drawings are all etchings, and the models came out of this. We were literally thinking with our hands. These are all sketch projects. Here you see it in Berlin, and the cuts in these buildings are these kind of lines that connect everything together. And then we moved from clay towards burnt ceramic, so it became effectively a ceramic project. And here you see you see the scale, some of the projects for these buildings, and they are still stitched together. This is the main plan in the form of a model. So you have West Berlin, East Berlin, you have strings, piano strings tying them together, and what I call the particles floating, as it were, in this void. And of course, there's a lot of thinking about how this void can be. Is it a resolution? Is it a solution towards the space? Or is it a space that itself projects into a future? And again, photographs by Hélène. Now, this project, again, was about this, the stitching together across the divide. And this has been a recurring theme that's in the life, my life, but also the life of Cora that I created in the early 90s. And I put these two slides together because I wanted to show the stitching of the divide here is a similar theme that you will see in the book, the Taiwan Strait, and the Conscious City Incubator book. And there you will see a stitching process that's based on mapping the differences between mainland China and Taiwan. And for about 30 years, I've been working with this designer, Joost Gotens, on mapping these differences. I've been 50 times back and forth across the Taiwan Strait until we decided to make a book that was actually not anymore an atlas, but a manual of operations. And this is based on a set of projects that we worked on with different kind of partners in mainland China and Taiwan, and always imagining that this space of historic conflict could become an incubator of cooperation and innovation. And Here you see a few of the kind of maps. It will be a large format book. And here you see a series of analytical maps showing a whole range of things. For example, hi Ing. And for example, the seaport development for cross-strait connections. And here you see an overview of the economic zone in the strait. So we did, mostly with students, a whole series of maps like this, creating the space, mapping the space of this incubator. Then Hélène came at one point. This is a series of photographs of the one point where, from mainland China, you can see Taiwan, and which is a series of small islands off the coast of mainland China. And so the people come here to look, and there's these kind of peculiar boulders there, which look a little bit like the particles in Berlin I showed before, and this weird infrastructure that kind of zips along the coast, waiting to be able to cross this strait. And then what we did over a period of 2-3 years is a series of workshops in which we literally negotiated. And so we invited students from Taiwan and students from mainland China. They came to the different cities, went across. And so here at the tables you see people from Xiamen in mainland China. This guy is from Taiwan, actually literally negotiating across the drawing board, developing prototypes. And you see an early version of the book. So this was a quite political project in a way. And with these people, we developed first in kind of logistics, a kind of infrastructure for this negotiation. And that consists out of effectively a gamification process. And we did that, we worked on that, and out of that came a series of scenarios. And once you see the book come out, it will have an introduction, a series of models and other things showing the methodology, and then it has 120 spreads like this, which are all scenarios. And they're all urban planning scenarios on all levels, on kind of very simple socio-cultural levels, on highly technological smart grid levels, and so forth, and so forth. Each time they're described as a potential scenario, they're interactive processes, and then they're basically made possible through this card system, which appears in the back of the book. And so the book is effectively a sample to do this yourself. And this, of course, this certainly has been projected forward through the recent tensions. You probably have seen the main Congress, National Congress in China has just been finished. You probably have seen the statements of President Xi Jinping in the press. Well, it's about this. And it's a potentially quite kind of tense region. So by the time we publish this book, it will be interesting to see how this will be used. We had been working with a publisher in Beijing on in the Mandarin version. This will probably come a bit later. There will be first an English version coming. What you see here is something you will see a few more times coming through. It's the Urban Gallery. It's a planning methodology we developed over the years. This is not only gamification, it also leads to a series of so-called action plans where with very specific projects we proposed to the different cities. Here's the city of Taichung in Taiwan. For example, here an energy map, so to develop the strategy for development of an energy plan for the city. We did the same, we developed an energy plan for the city of Xiamen. Again, those things are highly relevant in today's time when suddenly energy becomes a hot topic. And so I just want to show you a glimpse of these things leading to particular kind of urban planning projects. This is in itself now also part of a much bigger context. It's the context of the Belt and Road Initiative, something initiated by China, but part of a global supply chain network. So you could say, here's an image drawn by words, in which we could say, well, this is actually a version of the second skin. This is just a glimpse of the supply chain lines that you have in the world. And we did then a 2-year project with students on the supply chain urbanism. How do you actually work with the cities emerging out of the forces from these supply lines? And then we did a series of infographics with that spheres that I printed. I brought a few here. Maybe you've seen them already, right here. This is, I think, about the growth of rice production. And Morris, I think this is the one of the effects on of the Arctic. Huh? So, do you want to touch them? Okay, I give them around, yeah? Please, at the end, anything, but you see the space shrinking. And this kind of topic became part of one of 20 projects we did about the supply chain urbanism. And here you see one, this is one little introduction I did keep from the BBC, because the BBC talks here about Svalbard, right, one of these islands in the Arctic Circle, the race to save the fastest warming place on Earth. And what happens in these islands is that global warming is happening 6 times faster than any other place on Earth. So it's a kind of radical heating. And I just wanted to show you, to exemplify the project of this team. And they looked at one aspect of this supply chain and the Belt and Road Initiative, namely the information line that runs from China to Europe across the more and more free coming waters, and they look at data, how data are transported along this line, and how data need energy, and how do you generate energy in the sites where the line, as it were, is docked into the land, like in Siberia, and where energy is generated, and where urbanization is being created, and where in 20, 40 years we will have cities with the changes. So you see some of the kind of dynamic work that depicts in different ways highly complex things that are otherwise cannot be seen. Then they did a fantastic set of maps, and they kind of located these places where the boats, for example, dock, are linked to biofuel factories here. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but you see how we go from the kind of the global, the regional, towards these sites that are then extremely concrete. And let's take one look deeper into this. The question was, of course, what happens then actually in one of these places? And you see in the spheres, this is one of the most endangered regions on Earth. Is it possible to link up to highly controversial themes like geoengineering, for example? Is it possible, they asked, is it possible to create a city that is based on the technology of geoengineering, houses people, and yet leaves the landscape into a kind of future state of future well-being? Not easy, and incredibly complex also. That's why I like to show this video from this team here, because it's also incredibly bold to try it, because at the moment geoengineering doesn't have a good press, and yet we probably have to go in this direction. So these projects were done in studios in the chair to test the kind of positive side, you could say, of the development of these supply chains. We called it hacking and flipping. Now, the big question that is raised, of course, out of these, and there's 19 more projects, I have a lot of more favorites, is what happens to nature here? What actually is nature here? Is it something that you then destroy, or is it something you have to take care for? So the next theme that we are setting up for this series of conferences next year is new nature. And it is more a question than a kind of solution. But it is a bit about, well, what is that, this nature that we supposedly have to take care of, right? Or supposedly are destroying. And I want to go back to a very personal moment. I've always been a fan of Mondrian, and I'm always an admirer of his kind of his sense of moving from the figurative towards the abstraction. If you look at the early paintings or drawings of Mondrian, you see trees and farmhouses. And what he actually wanted to try to reconcile is something that we saw before, the land with the kind of the object, but the object is nature here. The object is a tree. And he did that by coming to this. It is, of course, the core of Mondrian's work, right, the cross. You could also say it's a kind of geometry for the second skin of the earth. But the tree has fascinated me more and more in the last few years. Because actually Mondrian is about painting nature. It's not abstract, it's figurative. So the tree is something that's become very, very important recently. Now, this new nature, we did one year, we did a series of seminars. Maurice led these seminars well, first of all, we were teaching machine learning to students. It was an experiment, and kind of worked. And here you see some of the examples of this experiment, how machine learning can merge and so forth and so forth. You see a lot of that. But what's fascinating is that it kind of visualizes this question of the merging of global urbanization and nature. And this is purely pictorial, and yet this is something like that we're looking for. Right? That the things are one, but there's a kind of morphing between one and the other. And now I'm making a huge leap back, and I'm going to a project I did in '86, and it's called Spinoza's Garden. I was fascinated by the philosopher Spinoza, how he felt that kind of the spirit of everything was in nature, and I was fascinated what happened in the Netherlands, my home country, about the creation of artificial land, new nature, and then cities in this artificial land. Right? 50% of the Netherlands is like that. And it was a symbolic project, right? I was fascinated by the land, that the alchemical processes and bits of city moving in here. This is now in the collection of an institution in the museum in the Netherlands. But I was fascinated again to use a simple materiality to depict this kind of new nature process. And we did a similar thing in a competition we did a long time ago for the new center of Berlin, for the government center. You all know how it looks like today. That's where the chancellor sits. We had a slightly different image. We had the feeling that at the center of the government, in front of the Reichstag, there should be a kind of Urgarten, a kind of original garden. Yeah, it's the center of government, and everything else would be around it. So we did a series of studies what this Urgarten would kind of then front in the different places in this competition. We didn't win, obviously, because we actually designed this Urgarten, and let me show you how that actually looked like. So no green or colors or anything. We used a text by Arno Schmid, a fantastic German writer, and we kind of dissected his book Cosmos. And out of Cosmos, we derived these sets of materials, fluids and cyclical motions, malleable opacities, strings, and we divided them into layers of this garden. Of course, then you get gardeners. Today, this is a form of wild gardening that goes back to the original landscape in Brandenburg. But we were fascinated by how do you choreograph this? How do you plan this? And we showed this here in the first exhibition I had here in the forum when I came in. But it was fun to put them together, to kind of say, how does it work, this abstraction? To bring all of these into a workable garden. That's the center of government. New nature should be at the heart of the government. At this moment, I have to go back to the house where I grew up, which is behind here. I grew up in this forest. And I have undergone this kind of change, that the forest was about hiding and hide and seek and treasure hunts and all that. And now I recently went back and I realized this is carbon, right? This is a piece of carbon here. And these trees all have names and types, and they're possibly building materials. So new nature is also about a pact with nature, and this is very personal. I didn't write here, but almost. This is about understanding nature and actually working with nature, creating a kind of curative process with nature. And that is a process that we're now starting in a project called the Bauhütte 4.0, together with Fraunhofer. Is how do you do this actually? How do you move towards a new nature where the city represents the new nature? And how do you then go to the forest and say, well, can you be part of this? And not being exploitative, but actually giving us something that is good for you too. And so we've moved into a project recently. This is still the same forest where I grew up. into a series of projects. This was the Climate Smart Forest Economy project we just finished, in which we started to develop something that is called a value chain, an overall value chain that links biogenic construction towards the taking care of storage of carbon. So the question again, can you work on geoengineering in an urban project without being exploitative? Yes, it's about wood and wood construction, but it's actually about much more. Here you see a simplified drawing of the different components, the forest. Here's the city, that's the Schumacher Quartier. Here's the Brandenburger Forest. And in this project, we're actually bringing the actors together of all the parts of this project to effectively create a new nature that is based on pact with nature. And one of the discoveries I made, we also did this with students here, is that actually there's nobody designing this. There's no people that can plan or design these things, because here you have forest owners, which we had here in the forum during a series of workshops. Let me show you two things here. A quick introduction to the Bauhütte, which is a project we do with Tegelproject. This is already now a year and a half old. So the plan is to build a Forschungsfabrik, you say in German. It is actually a prototype factory in English. To build the prototypes, the city of Berlin needs to shift, to reach its climate targets. To act within this idea of new nature and build things out of wood or any other biogenic materials. And the question is, how do you actually do that? So I'm now running two videos here, and I'm throwing you deep into this territory. Here you see a glimpse of a project we did with Hovergay, on the side of Hovergay, and here you see a tool that you can visit here on the third floor, which is about actually measuring, precisely monitoring and measuring the amounts of wood available in Brandenburg, and there is a lot of wood, linking them to planning processes in the Schumacher Quartier, but also guaranteeing that there's a price that is economical for the building of social housing. So you see some of the things that were tested by us for the Schumacher Quartier with Tegelproject. And here you see very fast kind of the going up from percentages that are quite low towards quite high. This tool is much more recent, developed by Sebastian, who's here with a team of students also. And in this tool, it becomes quite precise. For example, we're taking models of Sharabi architects, student models, Prager Richter. They fed us models that we actually then measure very precisely. We link it back to the production. We link it back to sources of wood in Brandenburg, and we calculate exactly the price of wood, the production process, the speed of production, the carbon that is then ultimately stored in the city. And this is a very shortened video. This is a completely interactive model of Schumacher Quartier, which will possibly be part of the procurement processes over the next year or so for architects to build in here, for example, this slot here. Here you see then the calculations through which they will be judged whether they can build or not in the Schumacher Quartier. And we're just waiting for a delegation to come from Senate of Berlin with BIM and Stadtwerke to see if this tool can be employed for these procurement processes, because at the moment it's not moving, because you can't buy the wood for the right price and you can produce this amount of buildings in wood. So we tested this. This is a prototype, but it will be quite important could play a quite important role in the next stage of the Holzbau Initiative, the national initiative for wood construction of Germany. What is important also, that if Minister Geiwitz says, yes, we are going to build 400,000 housing units yearly because we need them, 100,000 of those are social housing, do they fit the climate targets that Minister Habeck is setting? No, they don't. Not if they're based on business as usual. So you need tools like this to make it even possible that we can reach these targets. So at the moment we're starting talks with different ministries about how the program is going to be developed, how tools like this could be used, and develop also the science behind that. This is on the 3rd floor, by the way. So one more leap forward. Now from wood away into a grass that's called bamboo. And this project I already mentioned briefly, the Global Bamboo Union, which we are setting up at the moment, where we're doing exactly the same. We're trying to work on this through this tool. Again, these are some glimpses coming from Sebastian. And we've just started to work with some partners in Thailand through Wasita, but also with the Indonesian government. They are very keen to create a model project of this value chain linking the vast potential of bamboo as a construction material to the vast need for social housing in Indonesia. And you just get a glimpse here of the numerics that say, look, if you use bamboo from here, you bring it to a factory here, you bring it to a housing association here. These are the kind of numbers you're dealing with. And on the scale of Indonesia, it's even bigger. Indonesia is just starting its kind of green strategy, and the first model project would take place in West Papua New Guinea. So this is slowly starting up, but we've had the first request of Indonesia, and this is some work from Wasita. Both Sebastian and Wasita are PhD students in the lab, and Wasita takes it a bit further, and she works with data from the government of Thailand. And she looks at the precise location of bamboo forests and availability and the relationship between the availability of bamboo and the logistics in order to get it to a city like Bangkok. So how do you have to create, as it were, the logistics for a value chain by working with forest owners here and housing associations here? It's something that's quite cutting edge. It's projecting into the future, this concept of new nature, because we don't yet have the right techniques to compress the bamboo. But it's something that's coming, quite fast, in fact. And of course, the rising kind of urbanization in Southeast Asia is going to make these things necessary. If not, the climate impact is going to be vast. And so we're planning a series of workshops, global workshops. Some of them will take place here, hopefully, in which we will play through the whole of the value chain bamboo to cities. And here you see some of that. We'll invite teams in all of these countries to work on different prototypes. Some of them we have already in place, a lot of them through ex-students. It's absolutely wonderful, a kind of alumni project is this, and in order to build this value chain. So that's, in a way, bringing the concept of new nature out of the poetic, out of the philosophical into planning and design. The last chapter, metaspaces. This gets quite exciting, because is this really this? Or not? We all know, of course, that Meta is the big thing, Facebook. We published a book called Metaspaces over 20 years ago, and also worked on the kind of the concept, the architectural concept of metaspaces. So we say, yes, of course, this is happening with Meta and so forth. But do they really have a grip on what it can mean? Let me go back to a series of sketches that I've been working on over many years, right? Let's say this base here represents urban dynamics, life in cities. And let's say you want to organize it. You kind of want to put it into some taxonomy in order to make it better, or economically more viable, or something like that. And then, what happens if we then begin to use this box, this archive, this conscious archive, in fact, which is a subtitle of this publication project. This is a conscious archive. Archive is active, is live. And what if we take things out of these layers here, and we use this box to connect them with each other? So years of smart city work has taught me it's absolutely necessary to do this. And also, if we want to look at very large regional projects, like, for example, we were working on a project linking the Rotterdam harbor to the Ruhr-Rhine metropolis area, it's quite important to say, okay, but hold on. In order to understand this urbanization, we have to be in this box here. We have to be in the meta space in order to understand the complexity and to be able to work with it. So we're moving slowly towards cybernetics as a driving force of the meta space. And we're moving also towards a kind of the more playful form of gamification of planning that you see here in these little spirals. Where do you start a project that can connect to another project? How do you steer the dynamic? That's basically cybernetics. And I just played a little bit with these wonderful screens that we have here, and which are like a form of drawing. And I said, okay, what if we move in? And we actually move into these little spirals, because then we begin to have a meta space. And in a few minutes, you're going to see a project presented by some of the BA students on a metaverse and doing very much something like this, but here with you. So hold on, we'll get there. And so how do you actually move in here? And how do you then make this real while it's still a virtual planning process for extremely complex developments? And climate change and a conscious city are complex. Much more interesting than Zuckerberg is Gordon Pask. He's one of the fathers of cybernetics. He's also one of the inventors of the computer. He actually knew how those things worked and how you could make them innovative. He also created poetic installations. And so he kind of thought on many levels. And by total coincidence, he taught with me in the Architectural Association. He was then getting on already. I was very young and starting. And we taught together for 2 years, basically cybernetic urbanism. And you could say everything I will show the last kind of slides is a form of cybernetic thinking. I want to go back once more to one of the really early projects, because the metaspace is also a poetic concept. It's a way we can capture narratives. And the narrative here I wanted to make, this is a project in the Art and Architecture Biennale somewhere in the Netherlands, was about this moment that an architect has to cut the ground, right? Architecture is a violent kind of profession. You have to cut the ground at some point. And so this whole project was about a kind of cosmogony of architecture. And that led to this whole thinking about the skin of the earth, because what you cut is the skin of the earth. And you have to think hard about it, what you do and why you do it. And we always talk about architects and urbanists are responsible for 40% of the planet's emissions, CO2 emissions. But this moment of cutting is also a moment you have to take responsibility for. So we did these 27 spheres with the help of Peter Rice of ARP. This is actually highly technological material. It's a very thin skin of fiber cement again. And this set me on course of, here I am walking through these. Again, these are photographs of Hélène. By the way, this was very beautiful because these lines were very long, and in the wind, this knife started to touch this and created a kind of music, a nightly music. And then a kind of big leap came that together, Hélène and myself, we chose about 20 black squares. She photographed them. And I raised the question, well, can we begin to open them up into, let's say, a piece of the second skin is becoming an urbanization process. So how do we move from something that looks like lava towards something that's in fact the dynamics of a city? And the planning dynamic complexity is one of the core themes we've developed in the chair also. So this is a huge leap I want to make. I've never actually superimposed these. I've done this for the first time. We were working a few years ago on a project for the City of London, in Royal Oak, where we tried to create a concept of a complete smart city. A smart city is another contentious subject, has led also to interesting discussions here internally. And the question is, how do you actually create a data-driven city that still has a good quality of life, or maybe because of it's data-driven? And we started to take these original images that were symbolic and poetic and kind of peel them apart into layers that could be the constitutive parts of a smart city. People, and this is about communities interacting with each other, logistics, the space of the city, and of course, the data cloud. And that led to this question, okay, where do we actually live? What is the second skin? Is it the square in which we like to have a coffee? Or is it actually the time we spend on the phone looking at what friends do and so on and so forth? These things are unresolved. And we're even beginning to understand what it could mean when cities become conscious. So this started the project where we then did a whole series of smart city attempts. This, at the end, was not built. We didn't have the political power to make it happen, but we had a whole series of meetings with the City of London. We did tests in Berlin. Obviously, this is Berlin, the same thing. But what is important is this. Are we beginning to understand what this means? Life in the data cloud, which is not somewhere out there. It's right here. You will see it in a few minutes. When these students showed you the meta spaces. So it's just beginning this understanding that this is also physical, it's not virtual. And it certainly will change our lives, just like the climate crisis will do. So yes, we have the classical image of the city. This is a project we did in Osaka, in Japan at some point. The classical view of architecture is radically changing. And that's something I learned in my years with the smart city process. No architects were involved anywhere in this. And second of all, beginning to learn it now is the level of conscious city thinking that we are now beginning to have. At some point, we switched and we said, okay, we were working on a project for the smart city expansion of the city of Chengdu in China. And behind there, you see a series of interactive graphs where we worked on energy levels of the city and how you can, with smart systems, begin to look into a future. And then for this Biennale in Chengdu, we decided to make games, to turn everything into a big game. And the game should be accessible to them. So it's one of my main pictures, because I have some lovely movies here, but where these girls are totally into it. And at this exhibition, 350,000 people came by. So 350,000 people played with this model. Here you see the expanded model of the city. And the idea is that we have to bring this generation into thinking and playing with what are very complex things, and that will develop, steer the cities of the future. For example, one of the things that you see here is again, this kind of energy concept for a city, to make a city energy plus and not energy minus. So one of the things that I must say, done with the greatest pleasure here is to do every year a lange Nacht der Wissenschaften. Every year we've done, our chair has organized a long year of the science, and this was the last year, just a few months ago, where we here in the forum, we set up our game, and we had a quiet flow of children coming and playing with tools that are effectively meant to be the tools to handle this kind of complexity that I'm talking about. But when I see them playing, I am absolutely delighted. They had no fear. They are not afraid. They design and they draw. And of course, we do this also with facilities. This is Herr Müller, who's the head of Vattenfall. So we did a workshop for Vattenfall, doing the same thing. There you see Georg leading one of the workshops. And of course, it's much more difficult to do this with grown-ups than with the kids. The kids are much faster. But again, here the process, the question was, how can we design a new set of districts in Berlin while optimizing the kind of energy, mobility, community systems for this area. This was in Neuschönhausen, I think. No, Oberschöneweide. So the gamification of these processes of finding new energy systems, linking them through digital processes together is one of the big questions also in the value chain of building with wood, is the digitalization of the process, one of the biggest challenges. The gamification of this is quite important. And so over the years we've been trying to treat urbanism as a kind of game. Not easy, but here I have to tell you one anecdote. This was a competition on the outskirts of Copenhagen years ago, and Big won the first prize. Big wasn't so big yet at the time, but they won the first prize. It was, of course, nice, big things. And we won the second prize. It was a game, effectively. But still, the game is full of housing and streets and stuff like that. And during the presentations, the mayor of this city region stood up and said, well, yes, I know you've given the first prize to big, but I would like to build the second prize. So this was a great moment. It didn't happen, of course, as these things don't happen. But by the way, the components are built of objects out of the office. But this was very close to a project we did win, and for the city of Berlin, which was one of the reasons I came here also, which was the Tempelhof, the first competition for the Tempelhof area. It started with the Columbia Dam, and then we ended up with a proposition for the complete ring, to turn the ring of Tempelhof into an energy generator. Actually, the first energy plus district of Europe. You know it hasn't happened, but now there's kind of stirrings on a political level, and this project will be part of the exhibition next year in Tempelhof itself. And they're specifically interested in this, which is a curatorial plan, so it's a curatorship plan of how to actually make this happen and all the part projects happen. And this, of course, because today this is hot, how do you create the highest form of energy efficiency and how do you create all forms of energy, alternative energies? And this is 12 years ago, and certainly would be useful to do this now with Burr Happelt, who were the engineers on this project. So things come back at some point. And Tempelhof is now saying, yes, it would have been fantastic, because which city owns such a space with such a symbolic form? And maybe that whole debate will come up again. So they've asked us to exhibit this, but also they have asked us to rebuild the Brainbox, which is here and still is downstairs somewhere. And they want this to be part of the exhibition. How, I don't know yet. It's a form of meta space that we created for a few years, where we tried to say, okay, how do you negotiate the smart city for Berlin? Well, you need a space, so we had it in a series of fairs and messen. Mayors came to the space, and it's a space in which you negotiate with tools. But the negotiation process is necessary, because you never know which systems would be the best to optimize a city. So why I included the Tempelhof project in this chapter is because to create a vision for a district like to be an energy plus district, for that you need a kind of meta space. You need a kind of box in which you say, well, it could be this energy plus district. How are we going to do this? So it is a meta space, it becomes very practical. It's not about fancy images and all that, but it's the space in which you negotiate potentially very conflictuous issues. And now we're living in this time of conflictuous issues. How much gas do we use every night? And so we created this Brainbox as a form of meta space that is both technological, but it's also socio-cultural, as a space to come together. And I think this is what Tempelhof is interested in. And this leads me maybe to the last two slides. And these are, before we move into the short kind of presentation of the Metaspaces seminar, two moments I want to show you of an interpretation of the metaspace, which I think are really important. The first one, of course, some of you are in here, and for me this is the biggest project I've been involved in here, is education, pedagogy, and the use of the spaces like these superb studios upstairs, this lobby in which you're sitting right now, to create a gamified, a kind of very playful form of understanding and searching for the city. So here we're doing the bean throwing, which we've done every year since I've been here. I think some of you have done it. And there we're doing the scenario workshops. Of course, there are many projects that came out of that. You've seen them in exhibitions. This is a projection of possibilities into the future. So education and pedagogy are probably the most significant meta space there is. And this is, for me, has been an honor to be part of that with you all. And I feel this is perhaps a better way of framing it than all the technology that may also be necessary to create, forest to city value chains, like the things I've shown before. But the space to freely imagine, to freely create is still the most important meta space. And the second moment, so again, thank you for all of this time to have spent with the students. The second bit, I want to show you, I want to read this out. I want to show you a bit of work of John Haydock. It's the last bit. This construction is the final element in a series of 60, oops, I'm going to go back for a moment. Oops, Fong. Thank you. So this construction of John Haydock is the final element in a series of 68 structures. Each element is individually named and dedicated to the victims who suffered in the Gestapo torture chambers. And this was presented there. And then the tower represents time was lowered twice. This is a project in 68. We built with, we built with, is it running? Okay. We built with, sorry, we're going to go once back. I want you to see this. So here we are again in this space. I go forward and one more. Okay, thank you. Just takes a moment. Now we're going back in time again once more. So I just showed you, you are the future. Now we're going to go back and look at the work of John Haydock, who started a lot of these things. And we built in the Architectural Association in my earliest years there. You see me in there, still brown hair. And we built the Collapse of Time, which was the final project of the victims, right? The project for the Holocaust victims of Berlin. And we built one of the components. And here you see us constructing this object in front of the Architectural Association. And you see people, this is Peter Salter here, quite well-known architect. And it is an incredible project because it's about the Holocaust being really the collapse of time. And he created this symbolic architecture, this tower that has 13 hours, 13, the 13th being one more. Here you see the chief engineer. And then the tower collapses over a series of weeks. And so we built this. And of course, recently that I got involved in this forest to city, city to forest value chain and making building kits like some of that you saw. This is a building kit. I never thought about that. But actually we created a little building kit of this symbolic project. And this is beautiful. Here's John Haydock. Here's Alvin Biarski, the dean. This is me, and this is Donald Bates. We're putting this tower up. And John Haydock is really the father of the kind of poetic architecture thinking. He's the father of this kind of installations and things like that. That's why I leave this running for a moment, because I want to show you what happens next. But I was? Yes, I was talking. Well, somebody has to choreograph this. Here we go. 1, 2. And up it goes. So this was time going up. We don't have a film, unfortunately, of the collapse of time, but it did collapse over the next few weeks. There it came. And stood. And I wanted to put that here as at the end of my 3 chapters, and this kind of overview of this publication, my van here. So I hadn't seen that. And I wanted to end with this as an introduction to something that's just happened last year. Moritz led a seminar cold matter spaces in which 50 students attended. It was a total experiment. And so we thought, are students interested in a metaverse? And we did a project. Morris led this, had guests, and they developed NFTs and they developed a metaspace. And I asked them a while ago, can you show some of this? Because this is the future. Partly because these new things emerging are sometimes so difficult for us to understand, and sometimes controversial. But the more and more I work with our partner Fraunhofer, IPK, on the building of cities in wood, the more I understand we need these tools. We need these new tools because the complexity is so great that we need to make them our own. And that's how, therefore I was so pleased that 50 students joined. It was totally amazing. Morris did a fantastic job. And but that comes back to these moments and people like John Haydick. So if you don't know John Haydick, look him up, his work. And I was very happy to be his student. That's why I know him. I was a year with him. And to be able to condense complexity of architecture to something actually quite simple. And in this case, dynamic. And make people engage with it is probably still some of the most important things of architectural thinking. So I'm going to thank you now. This was my part. And thank you. I see you all. And now I give over to the team of students led by Sabi and Alex here. They will take you for 5, maybe 10 minutes before the bar opens, of course. So you have to be patient. Through their work, this is their work, a version of a metaspace, actually a metaverse. Thank you. 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 Thank you very much. That's very. Now, you guys, this is over to you. So I will say something about it. Now that I'm finished, I've closed. Thank you. But they did this work for the seminar, then it has been exhibited. But I realize not everybody has seen it because it's not so easy to see it. So I asked them, can you transfer your objects into the lobby space where I hold a lecture? And they started to work on that. So they have transferred the exhibits from outside to inside here, right? So they are right here. And they will now take you through it. It's a slightly, it's a small choreographed element of their work. It's the whole group, of course, of work. And are you ready? I forgot to mention the word experiment. Experiment is one of the most important words in education. All right. Just a second, they're coming in front.
Are you done?
I'm done.
You're not done yet.
I just want to thank them.
Yes.
So one more applause for them, I think, for the whole group for this presentation. Thank you. There. Moritz, who led this.
Because we as colleagues, we also want to thank you. And I hand over to Ignacio and Birgit.
Thank you. Okay, there's not so much ready. We just have a present for you. We know you're going to stay among us a bit longer, but today is the kind of goodbye, and we want to give you a temporary experience, and it's a present from all your colleagues. So.
Yes, because at some point we realized that you also have a passion for music, and since you are an architect, we thought, why not bring this together? And one of the presents is a concert at the Berlin Philharmonic, at one of the most iconic buildings, in my opinion, in Berlin. And we thought this is a great combination for the two of you. Yes, and just a hint, choose one of the concerts of Kirill Petrenko. I really can recommend that. Here you are.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So this is our part. Oh, this is the program. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The bar is open. What? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, guys. That was fantastic.
We also were
That's
really,
fantastic.
thank you also a lot for all your input and for all your guidance throughout
Thank you
the
so
semester.
much, Raoul. We're really thankful. It was amazing. It was really good.